The people who hate Joe Rogan online remind me so much of, like, in the 90s when, like, angry moms would bitch and moan about Howard Stern. That's exactly what these people are. Oh, he needs to be responsible with his platform. Shut the fuck up! Why? People watch trash TV all the time. Does fucking Jersey Shore need to be responsible with their platform? People like Joe Rogan because he's not an ideologue. People like that shit. People like that in a time where it seems like all other media is, like, preaching and looking down on people and, like, on this, being on this pedestal. They can go to Joe Rogan where it's, like, just a dumb fuck getting high and it feels like you're just, like, talking to your friend, you know? Just, like, having discussions. And it's just real fucking cringe. Like, I hate this shit about Joe Rogan. Like, oh, get him off of Spotify. Fucking the government? Like, some guy who works for the government was like, oh, big tech has a responsibility to, like, are you fucking, like, fucking government 1 and 2 coming together? Fucking big tech and, like, someone who works for Joe Biden. Like, oh, big tech has a responsibility to, like, not have this. Shut the fuck up. This is just gonna make him more popular, too. He's gonna become, like, some martyr or whatever. Anyway, I like Joe Rogan. Of course I don't agree with him all the time, but that's why I like him. Like, learn to just fucking chill. Why does everything gotta be, like, mommied? Why do you have to mommy everything? Fucking damn. Shut the fuck up!
I did not find those arguments particularly convincing. Yeah, I think High Progressive spells it out right here. Difference is that wine moms got mad at Howard Stern for saying naughty words. People are mad at Joe Rogan for spreading misinformation about life-saving vaccines. Details matter. And climate change now, apparently.
Vaush bad. Vaush bad. Vaush bad.
The thing that I don't get is, like, how are you supposed to disagree with something, right? Like, so I don't think that a person who works in the federal government doesn't have a right to say that big tech has a responsibility to do X or Y. I mean, I guess the issue is that, like, this is always a lot less clear-cut than people seem to think. I'm pretty sure Shoe0nHead is okay with some elements of terms of service, right? Like, if there was a YouTube channel that was doing nothing but posting harass, dox, threats, whatever, you know, even if it wasn't illegal, I think she would be okay with that getting taken down. The stuff that I don't get about Joe Rogan, the idea that they were going to take down Joe Rogan, like take him off the platform, is just ridiculous, of course. That was never going to happen. Like that Neil Young thing, like, I mean, I get the principle, you know, but Joe Rogan is like the biggest media figure, like the biggest. He's not going to be. I was not going to be ousted by Neil Young. Not now, not ever. But in terms of like, what was it? Feels like, listen to it again. All right, I'll listen again. Let's go for it point by point.
The people who hate Joe Rogan online remind me so much of, like, in the 90s when, like, angry moms would bitch and moan about Howard Stern. That's exactly what these people are. Oh, he needs to be responsible with his platform.
I think that's a really bad comparison. All it really does is reveal that Shoe doesn't understand the difference between substantive and non-substantive concerns. Howard Stern was trashy, but, like, not like what Joe Rogan does, you know. It's not a civility thing. You know, it was civil, like Jordan Peterson's civil, right? He's a very civil guy. But, like, that's not the issue. You know, does Joe Rogan get up there and scream? You know, a little bit, but not really. You know, not like Howard Stern at least, but that's not the point.
Shut the fuck up! Why? People watch trash TV all the time. Does fucking Jersey Shore need to be responsible with their platform? People like Joe Rogan because he's not.
So, it's not about trash TV. And it's not about... Well, I think you can make an argument every platform should be responsible to some extent, right? I mean, like, obviously, we don't want, like, cigarette ads to 14-year-olds, you know? Um, there's always an argument to be made there. It's just where you draw the line. But, like, again, Jersey Shore is just, like, trashy and kind of vaguely misogynistic. Actually, Jersey Shore, I think, is equally misogynistic and misandristic. If I got my impression of men from that show, I would be a rampant misandrist, you know? I feel like I feel like that show is just a misanthropic. I feel like it's just all humanity is condemned in Jersey. I've seen a few episodes, you know, of Jersey Shore. Um, it's wild, really wild, really really wild. Uh, but anyway, again, it's not just about like trash TV. It's the COVID you know, misinfo stuff. It's pretty bad. Lots of people listen to Joe Rogan 3 times Tucker Carlson's audience, apparently. And that's pretty bad. Worth talking about, at least. I just don't think it's a fair equivalency.
Not an ideologue. People like that shit. People like that in a time where it seems like all other media is like preaching and looking down on people and like on this being on this pedestal. They can go to Joe Rogan where it's like just a dumb fuck.
The issue here, again, I think this says more about Shoe than Joe. Joe Rogan is an ideologue. He's just not honest about his biases. Or he's not aware of them. There's no such thing as an unbiased political agent. There are only people who lie about their biases or are not aware of them. For Joe Rogan, it's honestly probably not being aware. He doesn't strike me as a super bright guy. He absolutely has biases, though. Now, in terms of why people like Joe Rogan, because it feels like he doesn't talk down to you, that is true. However, you can refrain from talking down to people and not be preachy, while also not spreading misinfo about COVID to millions of people. I don't think there's a... I think you can I think you can throw the bathwater out without throwing the baby out. I think you can effectively distill the bad and the good here. If what you like is the down-to-earth lack of preachiness, which I agree is a good thing, you know, that's a fine thing. I go for it, sure, but I don't think that means you like need to keep all the, you know, bad stuff.
Getting high and it feels like you're just like talking to your friend, you know? Just like having discussions. And it's just real fucking cringe. Like, I hate this shit about Joe Rogan. Like, oh, get him off of Spotify. Fucking the government? Like, some guy who...
I will say, the way in which some people approach this is, let's say, optically challenging. I don't think Joe Rogan is going to get yeeted off Spotify anytime soon. They paid like $100 million for Joe Rogan. Yeah, like there is no public backlash outside of just nuclear. The pressures you would have to invoke in order to get them to back off. Sorry, let me close the background tab there. To back off of that would be they would have to be just exceptional. Like really, yeah, he is their biggest investment. He is a massive investment. There's a person spamming sports ball. I'm gay. I don't know what sports ball is. Shut up. Fool. Anyway, the way in which some people approach this issue is definitely a bit cringe in terms of like how they think it's going to resolve. The problem is like, what do you do when like the biggest media figure spreads really harmful information? What do you do? It's really difficult to answer this because, like, you know, you can try to get them taken off their platform, which everyone does to everyone they don't like, I think, as long as they think there's even a chance of them getting away with it. You can try to protest their language. With Joe Rogan, what people have done is they've tried to talk with him about this. But you guys have seen on this channel, people challenge Joe Rogan on the COVID stuff. He's very biased about it. he has strong biases on that subject. It doesn't seem like he's going to be moved, you know? Um, and you know, obviously he has the power to choose who he's going to have in his show. So as time goes on, it seems likely that there's probably going to be an increasing right-wing bent to the people that he brings on, just in large part because those are the people who are nicer to him, you know?
Who works for the government was like, oh, big tech has a responsibility to like, are you fucking like fucking government 1 and 2 coming together, fucking big tech and like someone who works for Joe Biden, like, oh, big tech has.
I really dislike the highly reductive statement that big tech is like government. It's a simplification that's used primarily by the right to equivocate getting banned from Twitter with being arrested by the government. It's a way of signal boosting and exaggerating their grievances to imply that persecution by Twitter TOS is comparable to persecution by government. Of course, there is an issue with the way big tech operates, but I don't like this language.
Has a responsibility to like not have this. Shut the fuck up.
And I don't find that a very convincing counter-argument. Also, in terms of a responsibility, yeah, don't we want to live in a world where powerful people have a responsibility to do good to the public? So here's the thing that's interesting to me, Shoe. Joe Rogan individually has more power to influence people's lives than most tech companies do. His show on its own, in terms of directly being able to command people's attention and sway their influence, is probably significantly greater than any of the actual policy decisions made in Twitter. Most of it is just done by people on Twitter. The most platforms like Twitter, MySpace, YouTube can do is tweak their algorithm to prioritize some stuff over others, but I think even the biggest swing in algorithmic exposure on YouTube, basically the largest media platform, would still be dwarfed by the influence Joe Rogan has. So why should the tech companies be responsible, but not him? I feel like this is another way of falling for this language of individualism. I think people with power should be responsible, whether they're in government and were elected there, or whether they're like media autocrats and got there via a different set of circumstances. If anything, I feel like we should hold the media autocrats, if not to a greater standard, at least to a greater degree of scrutiny than we do right now. Because a lot of people seem to think that, like, if you're not part of the government, like, whatever, do it, go for it, have fun, whatever, man. I don't believe that. I think Joe Rogan should be responsible, yeah. And if people had issues with Howard Stern or with Jersey Shore, I think they have a right to air those too. Though I think those are many degrees of separation less severe.
This is just gonna make him more popular, too. He's gonna become like some martyr or whatever.
That might probably be true.
Anyway, I like Joe Rogan. Of course I don't agree with him all the time, but that's why I like him. Like, learn to just...
I will admit, I don't understand why people like Joe Rogan outside of this George W. Bush-esque I would have a beer with him mentality. I genuinely don't understand. I understand that I'm not like your average dude. I don't follow sports. I suck cock. I don't leave my house. I don't have a regular job. I wear anime t-shirts. I'm gay. I watch anime, whatever. I get that I'm not like the target demographic, but whenever I see him, I don't think I've ever seen him offer like a meaningful insight. No, I know Joe Rogan's not for me. So to that extent, I don't get it. That's not to say it's like wrong to like Joe Rogan. I don't get it, It seems to me like a lot of it is just, I think, yeah, a little bit of being kind of a Gwyneth Paltrow for men. No, I agree with that, yeah. Oh, hey, Shoe, just a little bit. Just a smidge. there's like a Gwyneth Paltrow for men kind of vibe, I feel like, where you have this aesthetic of being down to earth that's tempered by the fact that they're incredibly rich and famous. Um, you have this weird pseudo mystical like obsession with alternative health culture in a way that's meant to be appealing to people who are kind of distrustful of more industry oriented sources, but who aren't like full on conspiracy quacks, you know? Now of course Gwyneth Paltrow is nowhere near as popular or famous or whatever as Joe Rogan is, but I guess I don't like Gwyneth Paltrow either. So, yeah, here, let's just finish the thing. Also, chat, speaking of optics and rhetoric, just so you guys know, spam adding Shoe0nHead to shit talk her is an excellent way of getting her, or in fact anyone, to glaze out and not pay attention to anything happening in the chat, perceiving it not as a series of individual grievances, but rather as a general tidal wave of undifferentiated hatred that she has no obligation to acknowledge, respond to, or consider.
Just fucking chill. Why does everything gotta be, like, mommied? Why do you have to mommy everything? Fucking damn. Shut the fuck up!
I guess that's not really an argument, but I guess I just don't know. I guess I just don't know what. Okay, here's a question, guys. Here's a question. What, in terms of outcomes, is the difference between a news channel owned by a billionaire that commands an enormous multinational audience, that covers political issues with a distinct slant, and a single podcaster who commands an audience of the same size, but rose to his position through comparatively humble beginnings? The answer is that my example is unrealistic because Joe Rogan gets 3 times the viewership of Tucker Carlson. So it's not a fair comparison. The difference is that the podcaster is more influential by far. That's true, by the way. I am very distrustful of power, and for that reason, I guess I'm always just going to be very sympathetic to people who are being critical of power. And Joe Rogan has, and I know it doesn't seem like it because he's really good at coming off like this everyman in spite of the fact that he's super wealthy and stuff. He is insanely powerful. In terms of like human thought, he commands power equivalent to or greater than any other media figure in this country and probably most other countries. He is unimaginably powerful. It's incredible how much power he has. Now, he's arrived at this power not through corrupt, institutional manipulation or through any of that bullshit. To my knowledge, I think he just had a podcast that really, 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 really took off. But I am, surprise to some of you, not a capitalist. And even when power is accrued through the free market, I don't think that necessarily means it's merited power, or that it's power which should be, exercised without check, uncritically. The difference is that, like, we don't really have systems for managing thought monopolies on media, really, Like, that's not really a thing, because it kind of intrudes in our free speech. If you have one company that dominates all computer part production, then sure, bust that trust, go for it, break up the monopoly. But if you've got a guy who gets listened to by like 12 million people, wait, I'm sorry. Rogan isn't Monopoly Lamau. He's had guests from all ideologies on. Google Monopoly. You'll understand what I meant. So, no, it's okay. He's got a lot of power. And he uses that power to do harm. Like, let's be real. The issue is the way in which he does it is, and Shu pointed this out correctly, more dangerous than the way in which people like Tucker Carlson does it. Yeah, definitely sock none left. And the reason for that is because he doesn't come off as preachy. It is way easier to convince people of a position if you get them to think they're the ones who thought it up, as opposed to simply telling them what the truth is. People like Tucker Carlson are effective, don't get me wrong, but they and any other news pundit with an obvious political bias is always going to be they're always going to be limited by the fact that when people watch them, there's always like a veneer of inauthenticity, of corporatism, of preachiness that does prevent people from opening up fully. That's not to say that you can't get very powerful that way. You certainly can, but it is much more effective to, be down to earth, to just chat with people and, okay, let people form their own conclusions, except that's always been kind of a lie, right? Let people form their own conclusions. Well, people form conclusions based on the information they're exposed to. And if you're controlling the information that they're exposed to, even if you let them form their own conclusions, those conclusions are statistically favorable to be likely to you. It's a kind of disingenuousness I don't like, Imagine, for example, that I didn't label myself as a socialist and I only played the video games. However, I did talk about politics frequently during the video games, which I do anyway. And in doing so, I never make any prescriptive statements, but I'm always doing this, yeah, dude, I just think capital is really destructive and that the rampant, uncontrolled growth of monopolized industry is going to lead to the downfall of civilization and also the working class as a right to economic democracy. But, you can form your own conclusions. I don't like that. I understand it comes off as a little bit less preachy, but it's always come off to me as dishonest. The strategy works best over a long period of time, so I'm pantomiming it a little bit here, but I'm obviously leading you to a conclusion in the way I've framed this information, and Joe Rogan leads people to conclusions too. There are obvious leading conclusions that he brings people to, like a distrust of broader institutions, like an affinity for alternative sources of health and medicine and dietary information. That stuff's fairly obvious, but there's also a feeling of persecution against Joe Rogan, despite him being literally the biggest guy in media, that other people in his fan base seem to take up to, in spite of the fact that he is, again, the top dog. Like, I don't think you can play the victim card with how you're treated when you are, again, the top dog. But people in his fan base do pick up on that. And they pick up on this distrust of legitimate authority. And when I say legitimate authority, I don't mean the president, I don't mean cops or the military, because those are authorities born out of political hierarchy, authorities born out of an exclusive use of and access to the means to commit violence. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about earned authority. I'm talking about expertise. A scientist is probably going to know more about science. Biologists themselves, a sociologist, these. It's not that people can't be wrong if they have a PhD. In fact, everyone who has a PhD who's ever disagreed with me on anything is wrong about at least something. And that happens all the time. Jordan Peterson is wrong about literally every single thing that he believes, and he has a PhD, though his academic record is not very impressive when you look into it. He got famous for lying about Bill C-16, not for being a good professor. Reviews of him would show the opposite, in fact. Punditry, not professorship. But I am okay with a respect for education. I mean, if you don't have that, then what do you have, really? Not an uncritical deference towards. But, if I wanted to learn how the inside of my monitor worked, and I asked, any random person off the street, I am overwhelmingly likely to get an answer which is less accurate than if I were to ask, say, a physicist, a technician, an engineer, computer scientist. I imagine there are a couple of electrical engineer, thank you, a couple of disciplines. There are some things out there that are just so complicated that expertise is kind of necessary to really understand it, Do you know how those old cathode ray tube monitors used to work? the ones that they're not around anymore. The CRT TVs, yeah, the critical race theory television screens. You know how those worked? It's really, really wild. It's like the electrical signal from the television port is channeled as a like beam of electrons that magnets inside of the tube bend to spread across the screen like 60 times a second in order to hit the little like picture elements to light it up. It's like magic. It's like there's a vacuum in there, and they're bending a beam of energy with magnets. Now that's insane. Now that technology is from decades and decades ago, and I know about that because of very smart YouTube people. But the expertise necessary to construct that would, even though the technology is decades old, it would probably take years to get a person to construct something like that with no formal training in it. We have a lot of respect for the hard sciences, but people can spend just as long understanding how the criminal justice system works. People can spend just as long or far longer learning about climate science. People can spend just as long or far longer learning about anything. There's nothing on earth that can't be complicated if you're willing to really learn about it. And there is a fine line to walk between respecting, experts and being uncritically deferential towards them, which is kind of like a technocratic perspective, which I do not favor. I think that's a very liberal attitude. The idea that experts are these you can't critique them. They're undifferentiated avatars of the knowledge and information. I don't favor that perspective. But Joe Rogan takes it way too far, as do a lot of, let's be real, conservatives, by cheapening and diminishing the value of technical expertise through some kind of folksy, aphoristic, appeal to the everyman. Do you guys understand what I'm talking about here? There are people who are Joe Rogan fans who would accuse me of elitism for what I'm saying right now. And I hope to God nobody watching believes that, but I feel like the statement, sometimes we should listen to people who have some degree of expertise on an issue, shouldn't be that controversial. That would be my hope. A very naive hope on my part. This is the thing that worries me about Joe Rogan. You have a massive media figure. How do you control him? I mean, like, if he's doing something bad, how do you make that not happen? What do you do to change that? Can you change his mind? I've seen people try. Can you kick him off the platform? Well, probably not. And even if you could, that wouldn't really change the minds of his followers, right? That wouldn't fix the issue. The honest answer that I have is that I don't know. I don't know if there's any way through policy or through non-policy based action to meaningfully undo that damage. But I'm not going to condemn people who are trying. And that's my disagreement with Shoe. I don't know what the right movement forward is, but I know that pretending there's not a problem is one of the wrong answers. Calling people, preachy, satanic panic mom, anti-Howard Stern types for being concerned about tens of millions being exposed to COVID misinfo. I think that is a wrong answer. One of the wrong answers.